WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent. Detroit has come a long way since declaring bankruptcy in 2013. Basic services have been restored, and according to the city, the population is growing. But a lot of challenges remain. Residents are struggling to afford a place to live. Detroit students aren't keeping pace with the rest of the state or the nation. And many longtime Detroit residents feel excluded in Detroit's transformation. So where do we go from here? And who's the right person to lead the city into its next chapter? Come November, Detroit residents will make that decision when they elect a new mayor. There are 9 candidates, plus 2 write-ins, that believe they are the right person for the job. Jonathan Barlow is one of them. Barlow is a lifelong Detroiter and businessman, and he joins us now. Jonathan, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks so much for having me. And good morning to you, Robin.
Good morning. So we got to start with the $1 million question. Why do you want to be the city's next mayor?
Well, Robin, first of all, just thanks for having me on. And thanks to WDET for all the great information that you all have always shared with the community, directly to the community. My pursuit for this office has been something that's been brewing for almost 15 plus years now. I am one of the ones who have gone to the best public schools, Bates Academy and Renaissance High School, stay here as a college student at Wayne State University. Thank God we're on Wayne State University's campus right now. And ultimately, I've been given the opportunity to continue a legacy that I was planted in with my grandmother growing up with Rosa Parks and my grandfather pretty much coming off the civil rights movement, doing a lot of work as a pastor in Southwest Detroit for 40 years. So I'm building on a community organizing legacy. And that's what I did and ran for in 2009 as a city council candidate. The reason why I'm running for mayor is because I've seen too many Detroiters lose trying to win. It's very saddening to see a system that continues to fail Detroiters. And I believe that this is a point in time a critical point in time for Detroit, in which we have to have strong leadership, business acumen, but also a common touch that's able to see every last individual so no family falls through the gap.
You talk about community organizing as being a legacy that you want to continue. You are a businessman and an entrepreneur. So how do you bridge those things? How do you bridge organizing and your experience as a businessman, as someone who has enjoyed entrepreneurship and the fruits of that?
Well, I think that a lot of people might want to look at what's called a L3C, which is a designation for a company that looks like a social enterprise. And a social enterprise is impactful, it can create profit, but it can also do what the things necessary to move the needle and push society forward. And that's where innovation lies. And so when you start talking about who needs to lead this city, you need someone that fully understands not only systems, how to correct them, how to tweak them to make sure that customer service and a production stays optimal, but also the ability to be able to create entrepreneurs and create those who can innovate from inside so that they can fix it real time and that you get full engagement both in your employees in the city and outside in the constituents.
Could you give us some specific examples of some of the work that you've done that you think is going to speak to the role of mayor?
So get this. I have probably one of the most extensive backgrounds in legislative experience, so I understand policy. I was telling you earlier that I was in this very production studio,
yes.
And I pushed for an initiative to bring one of the emerging industries into the city, which not only put us in position for more tax revenue that can come into the city, but just entrepreneurship and other business owners. And I coupled it with social equity programs.
And that's cannabis.
Yes, that is cannabis. But I've also been the advocate for sports gambling, for EV charging and those type of scenarios, industries. but also VTOLs in the air mobility industry and drones. We're talking about building an innovation hub for the international community, something that has never been pitched to Detroit until now, and I'm the candidate that's doing it.
You have an 11-page plan that outlines many of your ideas for the city, and I want to address a couple of them because it ties into what you're talking about. You have plans to attract businesses, and those businesses, it would require tax incentives. But we know Detroit residents have expressed frustration about funding development projects through tax abatements and incentives. So how do you justify providing this sort of incentive to grow businesses here?
Well, you'll also see a phase-in plan. So they're not getting incentives just off the jump like they normally do. They have to make sure that the outputs, meaning that anytime they have workforce development metrics in there for hiring Detroiters, or anytime they're looking to do community projects or anything that we're looking for in lieu of them getting those incentives, those outputs have to be tied and indexed into the incentives. No community benefits ordinance or agreement can do that. You have to actually put it in the initial incentive agreement. And so only business people understand that. And that's why some of them leaders have been able to skip over and kind of pull one over our eyes and have us distracted in terms of pushing for advocacy and CBAs and CBOs when we could have had it justified and done initially. And so holding other corporations accountable is one of my fortes. I've done it nationwide. And so when I give these corporations, or any corporation, any love from the city, they're going to have to give love back, because I got the citizens back, and I bring those values to the decision table every day.
You also want to, in this plan, invest in the technological advancement of the city's transportation systems, like roads and traffic lights. How exactly would you upgrade them, and how would you pay for it?
So we often overlook the many startups and founders and organizations that are doing work already. And there lies a lot of technology at Black Tech Saturdays and other organizations in which we can really pilot a lot of programs. And so what I'm looking to do is create a whole innovation fast track within our community innovation hubs that will be within our each district. I'm going to try to put multiple in there before my administration is over, but at least one within the first 18 months in each district will start to house not only wellness centers, but one-stop business centers in which innovation will spur and encourage public safety, civic engagement, and also be able to make sure that we do the things necessary to get cameras in the right place. Just think about it like this. I have technology right now to loop all types of personal cameras and residence cameras together to create a blueprint to get that footage and leave it civic based.
Are you suggesting more surveillance then, because we know the city is already heavily surveilled?
Well, I'm saying right now the citizens don't have their own surveillance methods. We don't have neighborhood watch anymore. Why is that? But we have more cameras. That doesn't make sense. And so erecting plans, making sure the CVI dollars are used properly. I can very well use technology with new civic engagement models and approaches to really get the job done. I'm a very innovative, crafty person. When it comes down to really skinning a cat, there's a lot of ways to do it, but I'm the most frugal person when it comes to it. So I'm going to save us money at the same time while I fix the problem.
You're listening to the Metro on 101.9 WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guest is businessman Jonathan Barlow. He is one of the candidates vying to be the next mayor of Detroit, and we're discussing some of his plans if he's elected. We can't talk about leading Detroit without talking about one of the most pressing issues that's facing folks here. We know over half of renters in the city are cost burdened, meaning they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing. How do you plan to provide more affordable housing for residents? What does that look like?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question, Robin, because housing is one of the core issues that I plan on solving. People see me all over TikTok shooting basketball hoops at vacant houses because we've tore down so many houses when we could have put families in them. And so when you have 6,400 DPS students that are homeless, you can get 10% of them off the streets immediately if we all put our hands to it. And so with investors looking to get properties out of the land bank in which they've been roadblocked and pretty much barricaded, and then all of a sudden these properties end up in someone else's hands, there's a lot of fishiness that's going on with the land bank. That's a lot of people have said a lot of things about that. But what I plan on doing is making sure that we attack it with the last 40,000 units that they still have, making sure that we put an agreement in place, and I put someone over there that can very well get legacy Detroiters the opportunity to reinvest in the city and get homeless families and fast track them off the streets in order to give not only a tax increase to the city for those new properties that are being rehabbed after 18 months, because I'm going to give those legacy Detroiters a break for getting that family off the street and getting them up and going.
And when we talk about the problem of homelessness and housing insecurity, I mean, you just mentioned Detroit students and the high numbers of Detroit students experiencing homelessness. And it's probably actually much higher than we know. That's what a lot of advocates say in terms of the way that they're counted. A lot of folks or a lot of kids are slipping through the cracks. I want to talk about Detroit Public Schools Community District. You've noted you're a product of Detroit Public Schools. They've shown some improvements, especially when it comes to things like teacher retention. But the district is still struggling a lot when it comes to reading and math, for example. We know this current administration, Mike Duggan, has been very hands-off when it comes to K through 12 education. How will you work with schools to improve student outcomes?
Well, not only am I the only candidate that's really gone through DPS K through 12, but I'm the most intimate when it comes to DPS. My mother was the secretary of the board in the 90s for the Hope team. And so I've seen Mike Duggan since then go in and out of the back of those boardrooms, because he's been fixing problems and doing things the whole time. So I understand his philosophy and his approach. What that current administration has not been able to do is focus on family. There's a very big disconnect between what he's been able to get the leaders to do for the city to make it look good on paper versus what he's been able to encourage them to do to engage and get citizens involved with all the matters of the city and start to speak up for themselves. And so when you start to talk about DPS and wrapping our arms around them, first of all, everybody knows day one I'm meeting with DPS board members, but I'm also creating a joint educational task force to make sure that our wraparound services for the city start to make sure that these families aren't slipping through the cracks. And so working with both public and charter, I'm the only candidate who's worked at Central, Durfee, and Spain, 3 separate DPS schools. I've coached basketball at Renaissance and UPrep, so I've seen the public and charter environment. And so when you look at really what's the core issue going on, you can look right at PAL, because PAL needs support in helping their parents get to the level of development that we need to create real well-rounded homes. And what I mean by that is this: I wouldn't have a situation in Pingree Park right now with parents and community members if PAL had the support from the Detroit Parent Network, had the support of all of our churches, and had the support of all of us coming together to help their parents get everything that they need to get to advocate properly for their youth in those programs and in schools. And so what I mean is I'm recreating the family fabric. I want to make Detroit community again and make sure that we ensure that every home has what it needs to get by. And so helping DPS is around wraparound services and meeting with the superintendent and the board members immediately before I have to have more influence.
A lot of lawmakers that I've spoken with and city officials have not had a grasp of chronic absenteeism and just how pressing of an issue that is for our city and for kids in our city. What are your thoughts on how to tackle that?
They've tried to do everything besides, and I've heard they've even tried to pay the kids.
They have, yes. Yeah, and actually that program has been successful, but it's not enough, and it was just done sort of on an experimental basis, and it may come back in the fall. But what else can be done? Well,
I mean, we always mishandle our assets and resources, such as the millions of dollars of studio equipment that was given over to DPS. It was mismanaged. The kids never really used it, so they never really started to tell their story through production and other things. And so what I'm looking at is making sure that these community innovation hubs are attached to schools in a lot of ways, so that we create environments like Detroit Hispanic Development Corporation has. They have the Best Buy Clubhouse. They have the podcast studio, the green room, and everything. So we're going to give the community what they need.
We're running out of time here, Jonathan. So in the last 30 seconds that we have, if you're elected, day one, what's your primary focus?
My primary focus is to continue to love on Detroit more than any leader has ever been. Or has ever done. I'm going to be the most successful mayor. I'm going to make sure that mobility becomes a thing, make sure that this food desert gets replenished. I'm going to make sure that we reach every family with the most money, jobs, and homes, because I'm a businessman, but I love Detroit more than anyone. And I can reassure you all, we're going to make history in this election, because I know Detroit is ready.
Jonathan Barlow is running to be the next mayor of the city of Detroit. Jonathan, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Primary election is August 5th. The top two vote getters will move on to the general election in November. We've spoken with 6 other candidates to hear those conversations. Find the Metro podcast or go to WDET.org. We'll continue to bring you conversations with the candidates as the race progresses. Coming up, a 1995 heat wave in Chicago killed over 700 people. We spoke with a researcher about what we can learn from that tragedy. Stay with us. We'll be right back here on the Metro. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. Stay with us.